friends, and I'm so glad you can make it here tonight. I want to thank Ivyland New Church for inviting me to come. Thank you, Ryan. And I want to give a big thanks to Alan and Susie Laidlaw for putting this all together. It's not a small amount of work. Thank you. I know you're shaking your head, but I appreciate the effort that goes into these things. So, I like to call this presentation Travel to Nepal, mostly because I can imagine most of the people in the audience are probably never going to go to Nepal, and that this might be a little taste of what it would be like. Maybe by the end you feel like you have gone on a bit of a journey to Nepal. Maybe I will inspire you to actually go to Nepal. Who knows? Either way is good. And I'm going to start with what I call the Conroy caveat, is that every time I do a talk, I have way more things that I want to talk about that are of interest to me, a long list of stuff that I can't seem to fit in, and I don't know how to fit in. So I try to keep this thing down to around an hour, but there are so many interesting topics along the way regarding religion and politics, economics, the geography. There's so many things we could talk about outside of what I already talked about today. And some of that you might ask at the end, like, tell me more about this, or what do you know about that? And I might be like, I know nothing about that. I am welcome to questions along the way, as long as you're open to me saying, that might have to wait. So, but I am open to questions along the way.
Is it okay to take pictures or short video clips of the...
That might have to wait.
We are recording it.
Oh, you are?
Yeah.
Cool.
So I'm okay with that. Other way.
Just ask.
So a number of people have asked me, why Nepal? As if, like, why would anybody ever want to go to Nepal? Well, the first answer that I have is, this is the starter screen, this is just the show screen, is that it wasn't my choice. It was, why are we not forwarding? We've had some technical issues. It was my son's choice, Ben's choice. It was a graduation gift to go to somewhere. When my daughter graduated a number of years before, I took her to Iceland for her graduation gift. And so I said, Ben, where would you like to go within reason? And so a number of his choices were, it's like, I don't want to go to another place that's just like America. You know, and you can argue France is not like America, but you could also argue it's a whole lot like America. So he was batting around places like Vietnam, Thailand. And then he said, well, my good friend Heath Pitcairn went to Nepal and had a great time. And I was like, when he said Nepal, I was like, that's the one for me, if you want my opinion. And he did agree with me on that. I lit up for two different reasons. One, because I have, over the years, developed quite a love of the mountains. And two, I have cultivated an interest in Buddhism over the years. And so my love of mountains first started... Oh, hold on. Let me see. Maybe it's me. Unzap that. My love of the mountains started with Operation John Coulter with Dan Goodnow back in 1986. And I was a sophomore in college. That was about 67 Steves ago right there. And there's Danny Goodnow and a number of other people that you might know. So that was my first introduction to that. And then over the years, I did a lot of backpacking, but I also did a lot of climbing, a lot of rock climbing. And so the cultivation, and here's an old partner of mine right here. I was about to put a embarrassing picture of you on this because I knew you were coming, but I refrained from that.
Stephen, the picture back.
Yes.
Are you on the left?
I am on the left.
And then
That's Greg Coffin, Katya Goodnow, Alec Morley,
Katya. Yeah.
and then Danny Goodnow down there at the bottom with the bug eye glasses.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay. Thank
yeah,
you.
yeah. He was my tent mate for that whole trip for 30 days out in the wilderness. And that's Wyoming, by the way. Uh, so, as a rock climber and a backpacker, you sort of get attracted to all the mountaineering literature, people climbing Mount Everest and all that kind of thing. I watch all the movies and all that kind of stuff. And Nepal has like 8 of the 14 8,000-meter peaks. 8 of the biggest mountains in the world happen to be in Nepal. So it's a real destination spot for any avid mountaineer. That said, I am not an avid mountaineer. I have no interest in mountaineering. And if you know anything about it, the dangers are objectively, it's just very dangerous. And I have no interest in climbing Everest or K2 or any of those. I just don't like to suffer. That's the problem. I like to backpack, but I don't like to be out in a tent when it's 20 below zero and losing my fingers and not being able to sleep. So there is a difference between some of these things, and this is easy, relatively easy, not as easy as sitting on a beach with your toes in the sand, but it's in any case, I'm not. I've come to love the thought of Nepal and the mountains and being in the mountains, and I like not just the thought of it, but actually being there. So that's one of the, and also the other point was that I've gained an interest in Buddhism. Even when I was in theological school, I was very attracted to a lot of what Buddhism speaks about, because it also, one, it's very plain spoken, and then sometimes the overlap between my Swedenborgian New Church worldview was overpowering. Like, whoa, this is amazing what these two systems are really aligning towards. So I wanted to be closer to a place that would be the center of Buddhism. So in long and short, we agreed that we would take a serious look at going to Nepal. Honestly, I was kind of intimidated. I'd never traveled in that part of the world, and it was intimidating. Like, going to Norway is really easy, going to Iceland is really easy. But I just didn't know what to expect. And fortunately, I spoke to Kent Rogers, who most of you know, and he ran an orphanage in Nepal for many years. He's back in the States now. And he made it sound so doable. Boy, thank goodness he he had told me a lot about, he did a lot of trekking in Nepal. And I didn't used to know what trekking was. Like, I heard that term, but like, I just thought it was just backpacking. Well, it's a lot like backpacking, only it's a whole lot easier. Trekking in Nepal, when you go on a trek in Nepal, there are tea houses about every hour and a half or 2 hours in which you can stay the night, you can get a meal, you can have breakfast, and for the whopping sum of $5, you can have a dinner, an overnight stay, and breakfast. Yeah. So when I heard that price tag, I was like, this is for me. Let alone the idea of being in the mountains, but just the sheer price tag of being there. So the cost of getting there is the big cost. The cost of being there is very low.
So what's that picture?
So that picture is a prayer flag in the mountains, and that's probably, that might, I was going to say that is Dhaulagiri in the background, an 8,000 meter, but it may not be. But that's a prayer flag, and there are prayer flags set up all over the country as a, we'll cover that a little bit more later if we have time, but that's a prayer flag, and they're spread out all over the country. It's the Buddhist color palette, the red, green, white, and blue. So that's just a sort of a placeholder picture. Um, so these treks, they're a number of them, like some of the most famous ones go to the Everest Base Camp or the Annapurna Base Camp, which are circuits. So these are the paths that actual mountaineers have taken to get to the base of the base camps. But you get to go up there and you get to stay in the tea houses along the way, and you don't have to go up Everest to enjoy the circuit there. And some of them can last a week, some of them can last, if you do the whole circuit, it might take 3 weeks or more. And one of the most famous ones that is not really, one of the most beloved ones, I should say, is the Langtang circuit. And if you've ever watched that movie on Netflix called Aftershock, that is also featured in that movie. Aftershock is about the earthquake that happened in Nepal 2015 or 16. If you haven't seen it, it's really worthwhile seeing that movie. So there are some wonderful treks. And so people come from around the world to do this. This is like one of the big draws. It's actually outnumbers the people coming there from mountaineering. It's because the mountains are just huge and beautiful. And so people, as I said, from everywhere come. So Ben and I were so excited about the prospect of going on a trek. This is great. And so I ended up contacting some trekking companies, which there are a bazillion of them in Kathmandu, because that's probably their biggest tourist money comes from these trekking businesses. And I soon realized that the plan, Ben and I had to go the summer right after he graduated because the plan was for him to start a job, and he wasn't going to leave the job, the newly minted job, to go away for 3 or 4 weeks. And so we had to go that summer, this past summer, in the July time frame. And I soon realized that we were going during the monsoon season. And that, I did not understand what that actually meant. And it was, I called a number of different trekking companies, and it was universally recommended that you don't trek during the monsoon season. And some of the reasons are, well, first of all, the torrential rains that are amazingly heavy and that they wash so much water down that there are landslides and things like that. It's heavy rain, for sure. And secondly, something that's even more enticing, this is when all the leeches become active. And so you can be walking along and they attach onto your clothes, and the fact is that they actually bite through your clothing. And that once they're on there, they don't come off very easily. So you have to use things like salt and things like that. You have to extract them off of you. They're very tenacious little buggers. And so, I missed the tea house pic. Sorry. That's a tea house right there. That's a small one, by the way. I'm not keeping up with my photo and talk part. The other thing is they said, well, that with the monsoon season, all the mountains are covered in clouds, so you're going to hardly see what you want to see, which is actually a real disappointment because it's just amazing when you do see it. So they were like, you don't want to do that. You don't want to go on a trek then. But they said, if you have to go, if this is your only time slot, which was our only time slot, that we recommend you take a trip out to the Mustang region of the country. The Mustang region, let's see if I can expand that. And let's see, I got a dot. The Mustang region right there is right on the border of what was Tibet. Now it's China. Thank you, China. And they're right in that area. And so you have to travel all the way into that area. And the reason that they say go there is because the rain, here, let's forward to the next. You can see the rain happens all in here, and this pocket here is very arid. And that is because this is basically the Himalaya mountains. And when the monsoons come up, they brush up against the Himalayas, and they get stopped by the Himalayas. And the other side is called a rain shadow, if you haven't heard that phrase before. So it's dry, and it's very similar to like the Olympic forest in Washington State, and the other side of the Cascades is fairly arid on that side. And so the Mustang region basically doesn't get much rain during the year. And like, so you can, that would be a place to go, they said. So, the big hitch, though. It wasn't over yet. So you have to take these. You have to take this drive up all the way to. Back one. You have to drive all the way up through this region here, through the Himalayas, while it's raining, and there are roads that go through there. They're really just paths that four-wheel drive vehicles make their way up these valleys to get there. They're well-traveled, but that doesn't mean anything. And so these roads get washed out on a regular basis. You just get enough rain. And so these companies say, we would love to take you to the Mustang region, but we can't guarantee that we're going to get you there, nor can we guarantee that we're going to get you back in time for your flight. So I was starting to get really deflated about the whole thing. Just like, oh, what have I gotten myself into? Like, oh, I hadn't gotten into anything just yet. That's a little bit of the point. So we decided, dang it, we're going to go anyhow. We're going to go, and we're not going to make any commitments to any company or any plan until we get there, until we see the lay of the land, until we see what roads are available and pathways are doable. So there's no sense of tying up money and time with some commitment that can't be brought out. So, and the worst case is we don't commit to any of them, and we just travel around Kathmandu and parts of Nepal that are accessible to us. So we decided that we're just going to go, and that basically we left with no real plan. And as I like to say, it's not a real adventure if you already know the outcome. We did not know the outcome. So in case you were wondering, we did ask Brita if she wanted to go. And she gave a wholehearted no. She knew that this was going to be a way more work than vacationing. And she was so right. She would have hated this trip. She just would have just regretted ever coming. So she was very smart to pick up on that right there. All right, so we decided to go. We have a flight, 24 hours from JFK to Kathmandu with a layover in Doha. If you've ever been in a plane for that long, it's not very nice. And so we landed in Kathmandu. Here, expand that one right there. We got our taxi, assigned taxi, and we were pulling out of the airport. And so we start to pull into the city traffic, and oh my word, this is traffic like I've never seen before. Why expand? Go to the next. Just unbelievable traffic. Just cars everywhere, motorcycles everywhere, people wandering through it. It's just like pure chaos. And I really, both Ben and I, just our jaws were dropping. And apparently, this is how a lot of Asian cities are. I did not realize the chaos that it is. And
is that a one-way street?
That is a one-way street right there. And the two-way streets are even more interesting.
So you don't recommend driving?
So, and it's funny because Ben and I were talking about, oh, let's maybe rent some motorcycles and tool around, like, go to the, these little bits. And when I saw this, there is no way that I'm driving anywhere in this. I'm not driving anything in this country. I think you kind of have to grow up in this kind of, like, you have to have like 360 sensory awareness. And like we were with taxi drivers that really, like, were very aggressive and could navigate all of it. And I don't know how they did it, but they were doing it all the time. So if you grow up with it, I imagine that, like, you kind of develop what it is. Basically, if it's sort of like traffic, like a parking lot rules, where there are no rules. Once you realize there are no rules, then you accommodate, like you sort of do a little bit of a different dance. That's the only thing I can imagine. Yes. So motorcycles are the #1 vehicle used in Nepal and probably in a lot of Asian countries. One, because they can navigate all in and around the streets and that kind of thing if you don't get killed. But secondly, that they are inexpensive relative to a car. And there are very few cars in Nepal because Nepal has a 300% tax on vehicles. 300%. Wrap your mind around that. So every car is 4 times the original sticker price. Is that right? Am I doing the math right? Yeah. 100% plus 300. Yep. And so motorcycles are definitely the less expensive way to go. And so, well, one of the things that you learn there, I have 2 rules that I learned about. Motorcycles are used in ways that we don't use them in America. And so the first rule I came up with is that anything that can be carried on a motorcycle will be carried on a motorcycle. And I didn't have the presence of mind. I once saw somebody going down the road, 2 guys on a motorcycle, and the guy on the back was carrying like a wad of like maybe 10 or 12 pieces of rebar at like 12 to 16 feet long. It's like my jaw was on the floor. How can you do that? And like 12-foot ladders on people's shoulders. They figure out ways. I'm actually pretty impressed when it comes to. So there's the other rule that is a bit more disturbing, and that rule is that any child, any number of children at any age can be carried on a motorcycle without a helmet. This is normal. This is typical daily driving. So I'm not so keen on that one. I think that and it's very interesting that somebody else pointed out before that all of the males have helmets. It's that interesting. None of the kids or the women. So there's
One helmet per family.
yeah, 1 helmet per family.
It's the law.
What's that? It's the law?
The driver has to have an helmet.
Yeah, I guess so. So, okay. Where am I here? So we got to Kathmandu, and we settled into our Airbnb, which is in the middle of the busy part of Kathmandu, which is all of Kathmandu. What was I going to say? So we started exploring. We woke up in the morning. We started exploring parts of the city around us, and we explored the bazaars. And like we use that term, bazaar, but that's actually, I don't know whether it comes from that part of the world, but it actually just signifies, means, at least here in Nepal, these huge open-air markets that are set up and taken down every day. And it's just a daily thing. That's how people make their living. And so this, I have a bit of footage here. Expand that, please. Give a little taste of what it's like. And we're walking through, and motorcycles and people all just weave in. Honking is a different language there, too. It doesn't mean I hate you. It's kind of like something more. That's Ben, by the way, if you hadn't figured it out. Yeah, I'm walking here. But that definitely, that's the feel of the city in Kathmandu. It just, at least the part we were in, lots of narrow streets, lots of people selling stuff on the side. Okay. Can you pause that?
So did they drive on the left?
Yes, and they drive on the right too. Yeah, it's just whatever the flow. Yes, yes. No real rules for that. So we found that the Nepali people were genuinely warm people. Maybe people say that in every country you go to, but I just found that these people were exceptionally open-hearted, willing to strike up conversations, asking about your family, about your, where you come from, and there was something about the national character of at least the people that we ran into. And maybe it's a small sample, but
That's a beautiful face.
oh yes, this woman she was just amazing, and she was so engaging, and just I felt so lucky to actually be able to get a photo of her because she just was totally engaged.
So were there a lot of people that could speak English?
Yes, that's a good question. That most people in Kathmandu speak English, and it's not because they're trying to serve Americans and Brits, but it happens to be the language in which everyone can agree upon. So when Germans show up there, or when Koreans show up there, they all have learned a certain amount of English so that it's a way for everybody to talk from all different countries.
It's the lingua franca.
It's the lingua franca. And I'll come back to that in a bit, too. That's one of the things that made me feel a little bit better about going, was because there are 122 languages in Nepal. And Nepali is the language that's used by most, but that's a lot of languages for a small country. So it would be very intimidating to not be able to communicate easily in that. You're just even with the people that could speak English, there were still some problems communicating, to be sure. And I have to say that I never felt worried about my personal property or my physical well-being. I have felt more danger in Philadelphia or in other cities in the U.S. than I felt in Kathmandu. And this is a very interesting thing to me that I spoke to Dave Keith. I don't know whether you know Dave Keith, but he travels a lot, and he'd been to Nepal, and I pick his brain, like and I asked him about safety and these kinds of things. And he said, well, it's Nepali people. They're not like going to steal something for you. That's not their character. They might make you feel guilty about something and make you feel obliged to pay for something, but they're not going to outright steal money or belongings from you. I thought that was a really interesting comment that actually played out to be really true.
That came out in Aftershock, didn't it?
Yes.
That was really dramatic. They thought someone had they did take their things.
They did. Yeah, in fact, they did, and that was appalling to them.
Yeah,
absolutely. On many occasions, we were approached by people in Kathmandu. So we were there during the monsoon season, and we were the only Westerners there. I could say there may have been 2 other people we saw that were Anglos, but everybody else was Nepali or whatever, just because nobody comes during that season. Yeah, I don't know whether we're being stupid or smart by going, because there's certain advantages about going at that time. So we were like prime targets. We were just like they're the Americans. So we would often be regularly approached by people that very friendly and say, "Oh, hey, there's a festival down the road there, and can I walk down there with you and tell you about the festival?" And that can help me practice my English. And that's all. It's actually a pretty good hook. It's fairly benign. Okay, well, let's think. But you start hearing it often enough, and you realize it's a hook to somehow part you with your money. And after a while, I was like, I'm tired of this. I came up with a comeback for this. It's like, oh, you want to practice your English? You are in so much luck. I teach English. We could do a lesson for $20 right now. Nobody ever took me up on my offer. Yeah, it's a good price, isn't it? You've taught English for more. Yes. So Ben and I like to consider ourselves adventurous eaters. And that could be for better or for worse. And we dove right into the local street food scene, like the first day we showed up there. I wonder what my next photo is. Well, I'll just hold that right there. I wonder, do I have the food in there? Yes, I do. Okay, I'll back up. So the Kathmandu residents, I'm going to back up one. So the Kathmandu residents get up very early in the morning. They almost all own little businesses. It's like a whole city of just individual businesses. There are, at least in this city there, that's the way it is. Like everybody owns a little something, little space where they sell a little something. So they start off their morning very early, sweeping the trash off the street that their brain had brought in, and they need to do that because Kathmandu is a dirty city. Don't get me wrong. It's nothing. It's a dirty place, and these people are actually very fastidious. They try very hard to keep everything clean, but they do that first thing, and then they have breakfast. And I won't call it breakfast. It's something to eat early. Okay, switch to the next. And it is it's sort of like a deep fried dough in cooked in oil and like a wok. And they have these little things first thing in the morning, and they have a little bit of like a milk tea or a chai tea. So they have that early on, and that tides them over till about 10, and somewhere between 10 and 11 o'clock. They have one of the main meals, which is, unexpand, which is dal bhat is what it's called. And dal is like, if you've ever been to an Indian restaurant where dal is another word for lentils. And they have this kind of meal twice a day. And dal bhat is sort of like tapas style. It's like a variety of things with a bunch of rice, and then there is like a lentil-based brothy soup thing, like down here on the right there. And that usually gets mixed with the rice. But then there are like curried potatoes, maybe some pickled vegetables, a variety of other things, sometimes some fruit, things like that. And they eat this by the plate's full. By the time 10 or 11 o'clock comes around, they're mowing down big time on this. And it's not quite Indian. It's something like Indian, but it's its own set of flavors. They borrow a lot from the Indian cuisine, but it's still its own thing. So one of the other favorites of Nepal are momos. We had some momos here tonight. Momos are essentially just dumplings that are either steamed or sometimes pan-fried and served with a sauce. They're not like samosas that are deep-fried. These are, so they're filled with different kinds of fillings, whether it's vegetable, sometimes it's chicken, sometimes it's other stuff. The most interesting one is called buff momos, which is water buffalo. Yeah, so that's very different. What you will not see are beef momos in this part of the world, because they still honor cattle in a way that would be horrific for them to have a beef momo. So after a day or so, switching gears, we ended up connecting with, wait, no, wait, that's right. I forgot about this part. Oh, we're still adventurous eating. Sorry. So we took our food adventuring to a new level. Ben and I went to a traditional Newari restaurant in Kathmandu. And the Newari people are the indigenous people of Kathmandu Valley. There are a bunch of different, there's Sherpa people, there are these people, so the Newaris occupied this part of the world for a long time, and they have a very traditional cuisine, and this restaurant caters to this very old style of cooking, and apparently it's all the rage with young Nepali people. So one of the first things I ordered is this. It's called Newari sausage. And when I ordered Newari sausage, the waiter looked at me and he's like, "Are you really going to order this?" And I was like, "Man, bring it on, bring it on." So what I found out, I didn't know what I was picturing Western sausage. This is really just intestines that are cross-cut, wrapped in some sort of sinuous thing, boiled. That's a bad sign right there when the meat gets boiled, and then it's fried with no seasoning, nothing. You do get a little bit of a sauce. And Ben made the comment after eating it, was like, "Wow, that is a food you actually have to concentrate on to swallow." Both Ben and I agreed. We've been pretty adventurous, and this was by far the worst food we've ever had. Also, we had the pleasure of having what is called gidi. Gidi is fried water buffalo brain. And it doesn't taste as good as it sounds, does it? Very, very metallic. That was our adventurous. We did more adventurous eating, but I ended up later on. You'll find I lost my appetite not because of the food, but because of other reasons. So we ended up after a day or two. We ended up connecting with Nadine Rogers. Yes, so Nadine still lives in Nepal, outside of Kathmandu, or in the Kathmandu area, with her family, her husband, and her children, on the same property that the orphanage is on. They sold Kent sold his house to a school. We had such a great visit. We visited twice, once when we got there, and a second time went on a sort of return trip and sort of debriefed with her. It was so interesting debriefing with somebody that really knows the area. It's like, "Oh yeah, now we know this." No, in any case, that's down the road. But she was such a huge help and such a joy. We had a really wonderful time visiting with her. What she also did for us is that she happens to go to a choir in which a friend of hers has a son who owns and runs probably the most prominent trekking company in all Nepal. This is kind of very Bernathany kind of thing. And so when she made this inquiry for us, the woman who's really good friends with Nadine told her son Dawa, it's like, "You really need to take care of these people because they're really good friends with Nadine." And he took it to heart, and he really made big efforts for us to, because this was his sort of off season, and he doesn't really do anything during monsoon time, and he put together a trip for us. To the Mustang region, and that way because we had been talking about walking around to different shops, sort of interviewing different shops to see whether we would jive or we would resonate with somebody, and this worked out to be just amazing. And so we keep thanking Nadine for that connection. And so what he did, so in a few days, Dawa, friend of Nadine, would his outfit would drive us to the Mustang region, and we would stay at an inn, Panorama Inn, in that area with people that run a horse trekking firm out there, and they're two separate companies really, and that we would do some acclimatizing hikes in the Mustang region because we're getting higher and higher into the elevations, and then it would be topped off by the finale of going to Tilicho Lake, which is like the third or fourth highest lake in the world at 16,000 something feet. We'd have to go over a pass, Besancanto Pass, to get there, and that pass is only 17.4 or something. In any case, so he put together this trip for us, and we were very thankful. And the roads were passable enough at that time. So I was glad that we didn't commit to anything because the timing worked out. And who knows about the weather? Like that could have played out the opposite way, but it worked out in our favor.
So what's the elevation of Kathmandu?
Kathmandu is like 4,300 feet.
Oh, so it's not that.
It's not that high,
How did you feel at 17,000 feet?
well, I'll tell you about that a little bit later. Yes, we will get to that one. Let's see. So we had some days to kill. We had to do some shopping for some gear in Kathmandu. There's all these sort of shops. There's another whole story about North Fake gear and all that kind of stuff. We can talk about that later. There's too many like side trails that I could go down. And then we did some sightseeing. And before we start talking about some of the sites, that almost all of the sites that we went to and almost all of the sites in Kathmandu are of a religious nature. And what I wanted to say about that is that it's just really hard to overstate the importance of religion in Nepal. It's no small topic, and any visitor it's plain for a visitor to see that the practices and the values are just woven into the social fabric there, and I feel like it's a tangible feeling, and I don't know whether that's how that integrates in that positive feeling of safety there, but I just it's a very important aspect of that. So if you go walking around, any street has, these are all external kinds of things, but any street will have little niches and little mini temples where the people, on the daily basis, they drop off, they give little gifts of food, or they give the little, tikka dots on the Ganesh. Oh, maybe I have some, I forgot it. Oh, here we go. This kind of thing is just all over the place. And there, you can see that people leave stuff, they put the little dots on there. On a daily basis, they come by, like at 6 in the morning at sunrise, people are going to work and they make these offerings and they're ringing the bell. So you hear bells all over the city. And it's all part of the practice for them. Where was I? So they're all just all over the city. And there's just iconography all over that's either Hindu or Buddhist related. And so that is there are two different main religions in Nepal, Hinduism and Buddhism. About 80% of the people of Nepal are Hindu, while the other 20-ish% are Buddhist. But I've been told that if you ask somebody in Kathmandu, say, like, are you Hindu or are you Buddhist? They're like, yes. They're like, they don't, make a hard line between that. And it kind of makes sense to some degree because Buddhism sort of was birthed out of Hinduism, much like Christianity is out of Judaism. And so, but there are definitely differences, and that could be a topic that we could talk about afterwards, but those are the two main religions there.
Are there any Christian churches?
Well, I think that the choir that Nadine goes to is connected to a Christian church, but I think there are very few there. They are there. There are some Muslim mosques, very few, but we saw some people dressed in sort of the Muslim garb, Islamic garb, sort of white with a hat and a long gown and that kind of thing, as we were wandering through the city. But much less so. I mean, almost insignificant amount, I would say. Sorry you're behind a screen. Yeah, niches, and then there are, prayer wheels everywhere and prayer flags. Let's see, okay. So these are all over the country, and these, as I say, they're just externals, but the sheer volume and the usage of them is saying something at least about the level of practice that people, and by the people that we stayed with at like homestay places and things like that, it's very much integrated into their lives. This is not just a showing thing, and they're not interested in they don't care about converting people. It's about how you live. That's what it's about, and they'll probably never really talk to you about their religion outrightly unless you ask about it. They're not trying to get you to be or do anything. So the first place we went to is a place called, here I expand that, Pashupatinath. It's the largest temple in Kathmandu. It's a Hindu temple, and this does not do it justice because it covers so many acres. I mean, there are houses back there, but if you go expanded way to the left and right, it's just covering all this ground. It's a very important spot in Kathmandu. And so they do all kinds of religious functions, whether it's marriages, whether they're festivals, daily worship, funerals, all that kind of stuff happens there for the Hindus, and or at least the Hindu-based people. Also there. So I will get to that in a second, if you just bring that down. What there are sadhus. These people live on the grounds there, and sadhus are people that have basically given up all earthly attachments, and they basically live on the temple grounds in these sort of open-air huts, and they meditate, they talk about various things, they receive alms from people. It's part of they receive food while it's part of the religious duty to serve the people that are trying to achieve a certain spiritual path, to support them along that way. So there's a reciprocal relationship there. But these are sadhus. So that's sort of like monks in that scenario. And it's definitely different than like a Buddhist monk. But in this realm, this is the closest you get to that. One of the things, expand that up, please. One of the things that was most compelling to us is that this place has open-air public funeral pyres on a daily basis. And Ben and I were like, we've got to go there. Like, this is something that we do not see in America. And you don't come this far to miss this. And so this is very interesting to us. They perform about 40 per day, and they have about, I forget how many stations along the way. And then you don't see, there are some places where the family can gather, and the public can be around there. You can be over in this area, or when Ben and I showed up, we were sort of hanging out in this area, and we were getting a lot of the smoke in our face. Later, we realized that was restricted for families. We didn't know. But one of the docents said that these people believe, the Hindus believe, that the body is really just nothing, and that upon death, the body needs to be cremated immediately, and that's like within 2 to 3 hours of the death, which is really surprising. Yeah, I don't know why the timeline is that. Why to pressure, to speed it up? You have a thought?
In some climates, the body decomposes very quickly.
I had thought that once before too. So yeah, that's a really good point. But they're like, so the family gathers around real quick, and they bring them to the funeral pyre. And these funeral pyres are not like you see in the movies, not big old kinds of flames and Nordic burning of bodies. It's actually lots of brush and leaves and things like that, because actually, if you ever tried to burn like an animal on a pit like that, they don't burn that quick. And so there's a process of using these various leaves that keeps the heat and all that kind of stuff and breaks down the body so much faster. And then these ashes drop into the river, and it's all part of this sort of spiritual progress back to, I can't even explain it, but that's all part of that. So we sat it takes about 4 hours to do one, and we sat for a whole 4 hours during that process. Part of it getting, stuff in my, I did not like getting it in my nose because it didn't feel right too. Not just psychologically, it was physically not right to be breathing it in. I don't know what was going on. One of the things that you don't see in this photo, there are young men, boys and young men, along the water, in the water, scooping out things. What do you think they're doing in the water there?
Moving the ashes around.
Another idea. Anybody else? They're fishing out whatever gold and whatever. Yeah. And that all gets returned to the temple, I suppose. Because I asked one of the people, I was like, what are those boys doing there? They're like, oh, they're fishing out the gold from gold teeth or whatever metal objects that are worth anything. I sort of gave me a little bit of an Ogie feeling, but I guess it's all part of that process there. One of the things we also learned is that when the person dies, the eldest son needs to be there at the funeral pyre. And this is because they believe that he has to give these certain kinds of rites. In Hinduism, they were all about the rites and the kind of like the performance of things. And the eldest son needs to give these rites to the dead person. Otherwise, they don't transition into the next life. And so this made a connection. Somebody was saying, well, this is one of the reasons that males are so valued. One of the reasons, I won't say is the only one, one of the reasons that males are so valued in Hindu culture is you need somebody to help you to transition to the next life. So if, now to really get your feminist hackles up, up until recently, when a married man died, recently, let's say 1900 or so, that when his wife was expected to throw herself on the funeral pyre. How do you like that? And so when the British saw this in India, and they controlled India, they put the kibosh on that. They outlawed that completely. And if a man had multiple wives, they would have to, well, I don't know, but I was told that multiple wives would burn themselves on the funeral pyre. This is called sati, which is translated as true, like as in true love or pure love. So it's the expression of the truest love to die with your mate. It's kind of.
They didn't have kids.
Yeah, really. That would be awkward. There might be all kinds of subtleties that I don't know about, and maybe if they go off to your sister or something like that. But there still have been instances of this up until like 2015. They still find them happening, and so it's not totally obliterated. This kind of practice. So there was. Leaving that grim note behind, there was so much other interesting stuff to see there, but we ran out of time because our our stay there got cut short by torrential monsoon rain, which is here's a little video of it.
Oh, they thought you were funny.
Yeah. I will talk a little bit about that in a bit. That just was a fun little bit. Oh, let's stop that. So the next place we went to, another day, we went to a famous Buddhist temple called Swayambhu, and it's set on the top of a hill there in Kathmandu, and it's affectionately called Monkey Temple, and you can imagine why it's called Monkey Temple. You can't see them hanging around here, but there are plenty of monkeys floating around there. Once you get up on the top of the hill, you have great views of the city. That's one angle of it. You can see how densely packed it is. And there's one soccer field here. And I asked Dawa Stephen, the trekking guy, said, well, like, what sports do kids play here? And they said, actually, volleyball. They do a lot of volleyball because it takes a smaller amount of space to play rather than a game like soccer, which was interesting. I was like, oh, really? That's interesting. But that is one soccer field there. But that's a view from Swayambhu looking over the city. And as a side note, Saturdays are the only day off that Nepali people have, and they don't typically go like to sporting events or whatever. They take their family to these religious sites. And so I know this because I went to Swayambhu on Saturday when there were so many people there. Everybody and their family was there. And there were lots of monkeys there. Yeah, they're very well fed, and I love this photo. It's just I felt lucky to capture this moment. I like to call it Curious George. So at the top of the hill is flattened, and there's a whole complex of buildings up there. The most famous is this stupa. This is a stupa, and the stupa with the Buddha eyes right there. There's like every photo in the world has been taken of that, and postcards and everything. It's actually really interesting, but this is the complex for that. And let's see, do I have another one? Yeah, here's another image of that. So around the bottom of these stupas, there are also these little buildings in which various religious administrators or priests, I don't know what you would call them, they are in there, and they receive, let's go to the next photo. They receive gifts, food offerings, and then they offer the little tika. It's a little dot of pigment. It's called a tika, and it's called a number of other things in different Hindu parts of the world. But this is Buddhist, and so there's a lot of overlap. And there are a lot of different reasons for the tika, and sometimes it's just for, like, we're honoring you, like, as a guest. Others, like, sometimes it's a gray tika when it has to do with someone passing. So it depends on your variety of situations that you're there. And I'm not quite sure what this meant at this time, but there was a whole line of people getting this administered. And then there are also, encircling the whole place, is a whole series of prayer wheels, which people come around and spin them in counterclockwise or clockwise fashion. And then down below, at street level, there are also prayer wheels. And this woman here is, cleaning all of that stuff because Kathmandu is really dirty and dusty, and somebody needs to clean it. But this whole circling the city, and I just thought that was a really interesting image of someone taking care of that place. There are also there are little prayer wheels, and then there are really big prayer wheels.
Wow.
Yeah. So we can talk a little bit more about those later if we have time. And
Was it motorized?
no,
Somebody was spinning?
yeah, somebody's spinning it, and so they're the the significance of all that is something that would be fun to talk about. But I'm conscious of the amount of time it takes to do all that. I've been talking about prayer flags as well. So after a number of days of sightseeing and other little just logistics, we finally left for Kathmandu, and specifically up to the small town. Expand that, please. We started off in Kathmandu, and we ended up in a little town called Kegbeni. This was a 17-hour drive, despite whatever that says. And so the first half of the drive was from Kathmandu to Pokhara, which is a big town, a center of a lot of trekking. And then a little bit further around here, we got a different car. We got a much better four-wheel drive vehicle. Like, we were in a four-wheel drive vehicle, but then we got into like a true four-wheel drive vehicle that for this trip, from the next 8 hours, was this right here. And we had a driver who really knows the terrain, because you really don't want your average person just driving this. Even if they're good at four-wheel drive, you have to know where to be to get there.
Was it raining during the drive?
Yes, it was, as a matter of fact. Let's see. And this is a little video footage of our drive, our second half of the drive. So I can tell you right now that four-wheel driving is really great fun for the first 2 hours. It's so fun. And then after that, no guardrails, none of that stuff. So basically going up into the Himalayas through a valley, the Gandaki Valley.
Did you ever meet a car on that road?
What's that?
Did you ever meet a car?
Yes. It's an intricate dance that happens on there, and there are motorcycles that go up it. Like, these people on their motorcycles are crazy, and there are even some buses that go up there. Really, like when you see it, like, how are you going to get that thing up there? And they do it. But that's the kind of road. I mean, it's where the cars go. So I guess it's a road. So we arrived around midnight, and like my kidneys were shaking. But like, I was so done with that trip. So we were at 9,200 feet in Kegbeni, and we felt a little lightheaded, and that was to be expected. We woke up in the morning, and we actually felt pretty good. So the plan was to tool around the little village of Kegbeni for the morning, and then we were to hike up to 12,200 feet, another 3,000 feet up, to where we were, to the Panorama Inn, which would be sort of our home base area. But we got to hang around in Kegbeni, and we came to love this little town called Kegbeni because it's sort of like going back into history. It's just, you can already see by some of these buildings. We just fell in love with the, here, expand please. With every one of these, you may need to expand. This is just a typical courtyard in Kegbeni. Notice all that sort of like, that's the Tibetan mud style of construction, much like, sort of southwestern adobe kind of work, but a lot more stone. So then let's go to the next.
Wow.
Here's just another path right there. And we'll keep going on. And just tried to give you a little feel for what this was like. And here's this gate. There's a gate made of animal hide. I just thought that was so unusual. Go figure. So there are a lot of animals kept in these little pens, and just alleyways. And this town, I think the monastery was built in 1429. So this town has been around since the 1400s. And I think a lot of these buildings are pretty similar to what was there, except there is modern conveniences. Now, note here, see that ladder there? It's actually carved out of a log. And at first I was like, why would you do that? Why would you carve it out of a log? But I came to realize, this is where the animal pens are. And so for an animal to get up into these pen areas, you can't have just like a standard rung ladder. You have to have something that's a stepped ladder. And I was like, oh, that's what that's about.
All I could think of when I saw the dry stone wall was earthquake.
Oh, well, yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Terrible.
Littered all around the town are these kind of carved pieces of stone from, like, who knows when they were carved. Unexpand, please. And more similar kinds of stuff that just, I don't know the meaning of all the iconography and all this, but it's just fascinating to walk around a town like that. And I don't know what that is either, but it's something. I don't know what it is, but it's something. It might be symbolic. I honestly don't know, and that's the kind of thing I would love to ask somebody more about that. Along the way, we got to meet a bunch of fun people in Kagbani, and this guy, he was great. He didn't speak a lick of English, but he really has a great smile, and he loved playing with my big boy camera. And so we were trying, we wanted to share photos. We couldn't speak English, and we're like, how do we get your phone and these things to talk? And it turns out that even in this part of the world, everybody understands Wi-Fi and connecting your phone to various things. So smartphone tech is now the lingua franca of oh yeah, you understand that, I understand that, oh, this is how we make it work. So that was actually a very fun connection. Here is a friend of his there, and that's the house he lives in. And so they actually live in these. These aren't just like storage areas. These are actually living quarters. So it's quite something. Oh, so here we go. This was a really engaging woman. She was a character. My goodness, she came right up to us and she said, "I want you to take my photo. Take my photo." But like she didn't speak English, but she's like, it's like very demanding of it. And then and so we took a couple photos, and then she's like, "Give me some cash." and then not only that, we had this little bag of Indian spiced Cheetos. That's the best way to it's like she wants some of those too. It's like she took half the bag of Indian spiced Cheetos as well. She rooted around in her. You can see her garments there. She had finally pulled out an empty plastic bag and put some in there. I was so amused. I was like, whatever. So you can have the whole bag of Cheetos if you want. They're not even good for me. So let's see. So here's another character. This cutest little boy out sitting out in front of his house. There, this is where they're living. He's just a sweet little guy. And this guy right here is a very soft-spoken monk. He was our tour guide for the Buddhist monastery in Kagbani. Really sweet understated. And I guess he's one of also the monks that teaches the students there. This is actually a new temple, a new monastery. And you can see all the beautifully done construction. This is actually the quarters and maybe the classroom areas. And they have both, like they have older folks and like students, young students. So the monks of all ages. There you can see that one of these young men is, I assume, is meditating. This is the old temple. This is built in 1429. We got a tour in there. We were not allowed to take photos within that there. And that's built right next to the new temple right there in this complex. And this was amazing. I thought the old temple was really dark and sort of colorful inside, but as a building that's built in 1420, there's not very many windows, so it's like it's going to be dark. Here's the front door to the new temple, and one of the things that's always striking is you'll notice the Buddhist color palette is so vibrant and joyful. This is inside, and yeah, just every aspect of it is so interesting and colorful, and there weren't any lights on at that time. We were just getting the daylight through the windows, and these are all statues of Buddhas, like thousands of Buddhas, and we could talk about what all that means, but just notice all the joyful vibrance. So that made me reflect upon the nature of sacred architecture and what are we doing with architecture, and that shouldn't sacred architecture create spaces that reflect the kind of internal spaces you want to occupy. And if it's joyful and vibrant, give me more of that. I'll take that right there. And there are other good things. But it just made me reflect on what are we doing with our spaces. So here we are. This is, we're starting our hike out of Kegbeni. Here you can see it, the little bit down in there. And there's, again, Danke River. And you can see how arid it is. It's very dry. And they do grow various foodstuffs in these areas. But it's, they have to work hard at it.
Irrigated.
Yeah, it's irrigated. So that's us, me and Ben, leaving out that way. I had already had a head cold, and I wasn't feeling that well when we were leaving. I thought that I had either a head cold from Kathmandu, or because it's a dirty, dusty city, or I had a funeral pyre stuff in my head. I thought that maybe was what I was feeling. But as I was going up, I wasn't feeling well. I was slogging along, and one of the beautiful things along the way, there are these little villages along the way. This is a little town called Zhang on our way up to Panorama Inn. So the hike was about 6 miles, so we're gaining 3,000 feet, vertical feet, in 6 miles. That sounds like a lot, but in hiking terms, it's not that unreasonable to do. If you're fit, it's not that unreasonable to do. But that's a beautiful little spot there. So this is Panorama.
You're going from 0 to 3,000.
Well, if you're gaining 3,000 feet.
But I mean, 3,000 feet isn't bad if it's just 3,000.
Right.
Plus 3,000.
Right, yes. So this is Panorama Inn, which should be our home base here. You can see that it is still, since it's monsoon season, there is some greenery going on there, and I think that might be Dalagiri, which is one of the 8,000-meter peaks out there. You can see that it's also encased in clouds, so it's a little bit of our dilemma there. But it's a beautiful spot. Let me just back up to this, that when we arrived at this Panorama Inn, at the end of the 6-mile hike, gaining 3,000 feet, I knew I was not right. I was hurting really bad. It took every bit of energy to get me into that building. And I got in there, and I got my room, and I flopped on the bed, and I did not get out of bed for a day and a half. And I would get up to go to the bathroom, but they're like you've got like stage 2 altitude sickness, and that we need to get you back down to Kagbeni. So they took me back down there. And down there, I started taking Diamox, which is a drug that helps your body deal with altitude sickness. And another day, after another day down there, I came back up here to Panorama. They brought me because I was feeling well enough that I could do that with this drug. Meanwhile, Ben was trouncing around at 4,500 meters, like 14 and 15,000 feet, with the local Sherpa boys. They said he's like a real Tibetan. Because he had just run a marathon not that long before, and so he was in really good shape at that point. So they were impressed with him.
When they took you down, like, did they just like support you step by step, or like?
Well, I could walk.
Yeah.
No, I could walk. It wasn't like I needed to be on a stretcher or something like that. I just was so exhausted. I just had a pounding headache. I was nauseous, and after that, I just stopped eating. Like, I won't say stopped. I would eat a little bit, and I would feel like throwing up for the next 2 weeks, week and a half, while I was there. I lost probably 15 pounds. I just couldn't eat. So the next day, once I got back, and the next day I stayed there, I had to keep hiking because I had to keep acclimatizing, because the finale of the trip is to go over this 17,000-foot pass, and there's no way that I'm going to do it if I'm feeling like that. And you got to get your butt up and hiking to do it. So here we are. This is one of the acclimatizing hikes up this valley. So we made it up to was 4,700 meters, which I forget what that converts into. In any case, it's plenty high. It was high enough for me, and I was exhausted. I was so exhausted that I had to take a nap. It's like I'm parking it here for let me sleep for 20 minutes here. And so on the way back down, we stopped at Abba's little. This is Abba, which is an affectionate name for any local spiritual ascetic guy. This guy takes care of cattle, but what people from all around come randomly, and he welcomes them. He offers them tea, and then they ask him spiritually related questions or whatever, and he entertains them their questions. And then he goes about his business. But this is what people come from far and wide. And so we had tea with him, and we struck up a conversation in his broken English, and he talked about the art of living. I can't recreate that conversation, but it was pretty interesting. Little moment. He was very intelligent and had been some sort of politic guy in India. Left his family to be, that's what they do there. They leave the family and go off into the mountains, and that's culturally acceptable. In any case, the long and short of that is we spent some time with him, and it was interesting. It was worthwhile. On our way back, continuing the hike, we were entertained with the most beautiful light crossing the valley. I like to call this one of my two favorite photos from the trip. I called this light wash. The light was just coming in across the valley there, and you can see the peak of the mountains in there. So just to give you a sense of the expansiveness, and then unexpand, and then probably one of my favorites is this is. I like to call this High and Lonesome, and you just get the sense of the scale of things. Like if you've ever been to the Rocky Mountains, you know what big mountains feel like, and then make that bigger. Just make that bigger, and it's hard to really sort of get your head around it abstractly. But I love that shot. I don't know what that temple is, but it's just a little beautifully built little building there. Okay, what do we have next? Oh, so the next morning, or one of the next mornings, we took a pre-sunrise hike out to a place called Muktanath. This happens to be just a scene along the way at some beautiful mountain, Takuch, which is like at 6,000 meters. That's only 20-some thousand feet only. And so Muktanath happens to be. What is my next photo? Okay, well, I'll come back to that. Muktanath is one of the most important Hindu places in the sort of India, Nepal region. And it's a destination spot for Hindus from around the world. Even the president of India makes regular visits to Muktanath. And the reason is, unexpand please, is that this, there is, from the headwaters of the Ganges, the glacial headwaters of the Ganges, this is one of the sources of the Ganges. And so the water gets funneled into these 108 fountains. Unexpand, let's see if there's anything. Yes. So there are 108 fountains from which you're supposed to wash yourself under these, and it's glacial water, by the way. And so you go through and wash. And the point is that it will cleanse you of bad karma in an exponential way, rather than just like your normal cleansing. This is, headwaters of the Ganges. And the 108 is significant because it's something like 12 zodiacs times 9 planets, some explanation like that. I don't know exactly. Unexpand, please. And so here's a video of some people going through it. Some people just go in their underwear. Some people actually run. I'm going to ask you to pause in 1 second. Ben and I went through and did 108 of these. Okay, pause, please. So we did 108 of these, and that was cold enough for me. I'm not going to strip down and go through that thing. Right across from there, from the same water, there are these 2 pools, and there's a different religious rite that goes on here. The 2 pools. So one pool, as you go in, and you can go either direction. You go in and you wade into both, and you wade into the first one. You drop a coin into the pool, and that is to signify something that you are getting rid of in your life. And then you walk into the next pool. You can start playing it. Walk into the next pool, and you go and you dive your head under and grab a coin at the bottom of the pool there to signify something that you want in your life. I thought it was kind of nice ritual. And these guys are going to do that. I'm not quite sure what she's doing right there. It's not warm. It is not. No. And these boys are, they're trying to be courageous, but they're like, this is cold. And you can see there are people there with their cameras. Like, this is a big deal to come there, and to come to Muktanath. So there he is. There he's going in, grabbing a coin. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So let's see, where are we? Nearly. Okay. Oh yes, excellent. So with each passing day, I was definitely getting stronger. It was only a couple days, and then it was time to load up the horses and make our way to Tilicho Pass. And so these are Tibetan horses. They're rather small, and they are powerful little buggers despite their size. And they have evolved in this region for high altitude, just roaming. And when you get on there, you realize how powerful these little guys are. And they're in the sort of, Tibetan garb there. And you notice the tack. It's not the most comfortable way to go. Let's see, what do we have? Okay, so did I want to say something more about that? Yeah, so the first day was pretty easy riding, and it sort of culminated into riding up some of a little bit steeper slopes. That right back there is Dalagiri. That's 8,400 meters or something like that. Yeah, and It was certainly a beautiful, great ride. So that was part of the first day there, and the.
You actually did that, right?
Oh yeah, that was me on filming on the horse there. So the day we set up camp in a place called Karka. Karka is essentially a place where the yaks get brought down into this area, and they are. So the herders bring them down, or they sort of know when to come down too. I don't know how quite they do that. And then they end up milking the mothering yaks there. Here are all of our tents, by the way. And you can see, Talicha Lake is somewhere over there, way up high. This is at 12,600 feet, which is about where Panorama Inn is. So we didn't really gain much. We went down and back up and that kind of thing. But it was a beautiful spot. The mist started rolling in, and when it did, I got some footage of some really beautiful moments. I hope you can hear this. I just love this bit of footage. That spot is one of my favorite spots of the whole trip. Just so peaceful and and the yaks were coming down and the bulls were coming down and mating with the. It was a real natural moment. In the morning we woke up to a breakfast of. Yak milk, but this is traditional Tibetan breakfast called sampas, which is kind of like a porridge made out of like a roasted barley and something. But all the people of Tibet and that area, this is one of their main staples, and that you mix it with like a yak milk tea. Not just yak milk, but it's a heated tea that has herbs and all that kind of thing in. And what's slightly interesting to me was that all of us Westerners like to have our porridge like this really wet, like oatmeal or like cream of wheat, like kind of wet. And all the Tibetan guys, they would have this dry bowl of meal, and they would pour a little bit of the tea in there, and they would make these like really dry dough balls and eat it that way the whole way. It's like, ooh. It was interesting to me that people would even think about eating it that way, but it was really quite good as far as porridge goes. So we made. So this is at the top of Mesenkanto Pass. The horse ride up to this was incredibly challenging. The second day of riding was objectively dangerous to me. And part of it is there are steep ravines that you need to cross with the horses, and they're sort of the rainwaters like clear out all the soft soil. So you have these rivulets that are like maybe 15 feet down, and they're really steep, like that steep, and you have to cross it with a horse. So you have to do one of these kind of like way back on the horse's butt and immediately transition to the horse's neck without getting, because if you don't do that quite right, you're either going to get bucked off in a way and be rolling down the ravine. And then coming up to this pass, this is at 17,400 feet, and it's all rocky slope. And to get up there, the final approach was a long way of at least 45-degree pitch going up, and the horses had to like go back and forth on the way up this slope. And I just kept picturing like these horses, if they take a misstep and they fall over, I fall over. And I was imagining me falling with a horse onto the rock slope with a horse's weight on my leg. I could break a leg in a heartbeat because it's big, pointy talus kind of rock. I was intimidated at that point. And these horses are not your like summer camp horses either. They are ornery. They have personality, and they can be quite skittish. And the most ornery ones are led by the guide, were used by the guides. And even at that, when one of them would get going, the other ones would get freaked out. And fortunately, the two horsemen, Norbu and Mingmar, you might see a photo of them a little later, they would hop off their horses and they would run up the talus slopes at 17,000 feet and be on it in a second, being, keeping us safe, basically. They were doing stuff way above our pay grade. So this is at the top there. It's as soon as we got over there. So that's the group of us. That's Norbu and Ming. No, that's not Mingmar. It's another guy. Everybody was really fit except for me. I was the weakest link in this batch right here. Even this guy, who was one of the wealthiest men in Nepal, he was on this trip, and he was in better shape than me. But one of the things that when we crossed over there, we thought we were going to have some sort of like a prayer flag ceremony, and the wind was just kicking in, the wind and the rain, and you can't see it so much right there, but we crossed out of the rain shadow. We crossed into all the force of the weather hitting the mountain. Once you cross that crest, the wind was, the mountain was blocking, you get nailed by it. So we then ended up going down to Licho Lake there, and this is at like 16,400 feet. When it's not overcast, when it's sunny, this is like an electric blue. I've seen photos of it, but this doesn't do it justice. We camped, close to this side here with all these beautiful slopes. I kept on eyeballing the rock climbing lines on that. So this is Talicho Peak right there, and that's at like 24,000 feet. So when the sun is out, you have this mountain that rises another 8,000 feet out of the lake, which, you heard it, 16 something. The scale of it is quite something. And there's our little camp set up. At dinner, so we got there, and there was one guy that had been there for 33 days on his meditation retreat. He's a guy from Britain. He was doing his Buddhist practice. I don't know, but he was there for 33 days, and we did have dinner with him, and we chatted it up. We had a really great conversation, he and I did, comparing the Buddhist teachings to what Swedenborg teaches and Swedenborg's experiences. He had never heard of Swedenborg, but he was fascinated by things like the ideas of the nature of the self, the proprium, and these kinds of things. Like, wow, I never heard that before. That's just like what Buddha teaches. And so we had a great conversation there. We spent the night, what's the next? So that's the company, the Asian Trekking. You have to get the promo shot out of that. But you can see the weather. It was miserable in the morning. We spent the night at 33 degrees and drizzling, Philadelphia weather, really. This was July, and we spent the night hearing, how like when you're on a frozen lake and you hear the boom of the lake? Well, this was the boom of avalanches on Mount Talicho. They were just continuing down and down. It was intermittent, like every 20 minutes, half an hour, you'd hear. So in the morning, I think that nobody wanted to get out of the tent. And we knew that we had to pack up and get out of there because nobody was very happy with this situation. That might be the last one. Sort of to bring it to a close, getting out of there was objectively dangerous too because the winds were so high and the horses were freaking out. Like when the horses hear a lot of fluttering, they get freaked out. And eventually the Norbu and Mingmar basically said, get off the horses and run up the mountain, get away from these animals. Because they were just reining these bad boys in. And so we did. I mean, that's what else are we going to do? Like, I trusted them. So to wrap it all up, to bring it all to a close, basically we got safely back to Panorama Inn, and we got safely back to Kathmandu with lots of things we could talk about, and then safely got flight 24 hours back to JFK. And so there are a lot of ways I would conclude this, and things that I think about. One of my conclusions is that every time I travel to a new place, I just come to love the place and the people. I have a newfound affection for them, for that place, and I feel like my world is changed. Like my love for the world is different, and it's sort of like the world gets smaller, or maybe it's really like our hearts just get bigger, something like that, and just to expand that. And that's how I feel about and I just have this deep love for this place now, and the people and the connections, and maybe that's what everybody feels, and that's why they love to travel. But that's my story right there, and abbreviated. And now you can ask whatever questions you want.
Did you have any idea it was going to be that rigorous?
I didn't. I knew that it could have altitude sickness, and I knew that it was going to be. I knew it might be difficult, but I didn't know how difficult. And but I knew that it was going to be an adventure. I didn't. I didn't know the outcome. We knew that going there, we didn't know the outcome. And I'm glad. And honestly, the shared difficulty, as opposed to spending time hanging out on a beach, there's something deeply rewarding about spending time in shared difficulty with people that you know and you don't know. And that's one of the joys of backpacking and climbing and things like that. There's something different that happens than just relaxing together. And so I really love that. I'm very happy for that.
The people that own the yaks, where did they live? I mean, did they live like in individual houses, like here and there, or in little villages?
So they live, see that house right there? Yeah. That's one of them. They basically live out there. It's a hard life, actually. They're not like our regular farmers. They're out there in the mountains, and they're hiking. This is where, like the Sherpa people and all, they're known for their high altitude prowess, because they live this, taking these animals way up into the snow line practically. So they don't really live in wonderful circumstances.
What do they eat besides yak milk?
I'm not sure what the people out there eat. Sampa, they a very simple diet. I know that they do eat yak meat, and I'm sure that they can get things from nearby villages that brought up to them. And they're like you saw at Keg Benny, there were all those fields, and some of that stuff is grown and probably sent up to various people, bought in the markets and places that. And so to hike here would probably take a full day of hiking to get to this spot, to Yak Karka. So people do come out this way, and they bring provisions, that kind of thing. But they do eat yak as well, just as a protein.
I mean, I'm not trying to be silly, but they must not have dental care.
No. It's very. This is a really great point. Is that their health care is a problem, and if you get hurt or sick, there's not much for you. And these days are better, because the wealthy man that I was pointing towards, he was talking about how his mom had died when he was a young boy. And they didn't have anything they could do to help her. They had like shaman and people with herbs, but they didn't have anybody that could really help medically. And that's been a real problem over the years. And it's getting better, fortunately. healthcare is.
So do you have cell phone coverage in the cities?
Yes.
So
Yes.
once you're on these treks, that was it, right?
Yeah, there's not much up there. Yeah. Bill,
Is that right there, is that as steep as it looks?
it's pretty steep. It's about that steep. Yeah. There's, yeah. It's,
Sometimes,
yeah.
it can be deceptive.
Yeah. That's one of the reasons I took it, because it was getting steep and taking that turn.
And this wasn't even the hard day, right?
No, this was the easy day.
Horse or four-wheel drive, better?
Ooh. Well, horse is definitely more in touch with where the place you are. You know, where when you're in a four-wheel drive vehicle, you're sort of just trying to get there. There you go.
Do you know if the horses had shoes on?
That's a good
I'm
question.
just curious, because I think in rocky places, a lot of times they do put shoes on their horses, but some of these mountain horses that are native, they don't.
Yeah.
Well, it would be hard to do that, you know? So
Yeah.
I don't know. Sometimes they don't have them, and I was curious.
That's a really good question. I don't know whether you can zoom in on any of that. Can you see anything there? It's not really easy to see. But
Would the shoes slip on the rock?
that's what I was wondering. I was thinking they would be slippery on the rock because and there's the big talus rocks. Like one of the things I forgot to say is that I came to actually really trust the horses. Like their survival instinct was probably greater than my survival instinct, and their sense of balance was better than my sense of balance. So who am I to second guess? Because you know, like you get used to like controlling the horse. At a certain point, I'm like, you do what you do, and I'll just go along for the ride.
Wow. So after you couldn't ride on the horses anymore, how did you get down? I mean, did you walk down? Or?
We walked. Yeah, we walked and walked and walked and walked.
Oh my gosh. How far?
Oh. That was probably like 8 miles or something like that. It was enough. And it was really wet and slippery. And you don't want to be on those horses going the downhill on the slippery slopes either. But it was a long way. I don't even know the actual number, but I was very happy to be done. Let's just put it that way. It was that day.
So when you got back down, it was 16,000 feet, but you were much higher?
So the lake was at 16,000 feet. The pass was at 17,000 feet. On our way out, we had to go back up the pass and then way back down to past that yak carcass center. But we did have to go walk the horses down to the lake too. You're not supposed to ride the horses down to through that slope. You can take them up, but you can't take them down apparently. So, yeah, the hiking. I mean, it was tough. It was certainly, I've been backpacking before, so I knew that what I was in for in that regard.
And this guy stayed there after you guys left?
Yeah. He was hanging out there. British
guy.
Yeah, he ex-teacher.
When you go back to when you were in Kathmandu, that meal you had with the intestines,
Yeah.
you never said whether you ate it or not.
Oh, I did. I didn't eat all of it.
But you ate
I didn't eat the whole plate.
You were not clean platers.
No, we're not clean platers. No. No, no, he didn't eat all of it either. That was one of those things that we cried uncle on that one. Yeah.
Did they provide the food for you when you went on the trek? Or?
Yes, they did. They provided the food for us. The whole thing.
So just when you were in the restaurant area?
Yeah, when we were in Kathmandu, we were staying at like an Airbnb, or what is, I don't know whether you know the difference between a homestay and an Airbnb, but a homestay is like stay in somebody's home, and this one had multiple rooms. So we got to know a lot of people that way, families that way. But we went to the restaurants locally around that in Kathmandu, which we were excited to do because we were feeling adventurous. But
What an adventure.
Thanks for sharing.
yeah, you're welcome.
Wild for your stomach to get back
Actually,
to normal when you come home.
yeah, it actually took me quite a while to have my appetite return. And as I said, I lost quite a few pounds, verging on 20 pounds. So, yeah, I was happy to just get my appetite back. And I don't know, I think I may have had COVID, at that time, one of the symptoms of COVID was loss of appetite. I don't know whether I had multiple things going on. But
Because my son went over with his two daughters when one of the girls was they were in high school or.
oh yeah.
And when they came home, they were sick
Oh, really? Interesting.
afterward, yeah.
So how long were they? You know?
The girls were older, probably 18 and 16, or 18, 17. Yeah.
How long did they stay?
I think they were over there for about 10 days or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it certainly can happen. You have to watch the water. I didn't even talk about the water, things like that.
Yeah, they did talk about the water.
Yeah, you do have to be careful about that kind of
What
thing.
are you going there for?
Exactly. Why Nepal? That's exactly. Why would you go there? And those of us would say, why not Nepal?
So you had to buy water the whole time?
Yes, you bought water, and you had to be careful about how, even if you got a juice, if the glass had been recently washed and not dried, you can't trust the washing water. So if it were wet, that potentially could get you sick. And some restaurants are really good about that, and you come to know which restaurants are the right ones to go to. I mean, and then there are plenty of places, a lot of street places that you just, that's why they boil a lot of that stuff. You have tea and things like that, but yeah, it's sketchy. It really is sketchy.
What about the lake up high? Could you drink that water?
I don't know. We all brought water for that. There's a good question because who knows what kind of, those high mountain alpine lakes, they get that kind of mineral content, especially if they get that kind of electric blue. I don't know what that mineral is, but it may affect whether the drinkability of it. You might be able to filter it, but I think I would hesitate drinking that water.
How was the drive back?
Oh, it was the footage of it is I don't have footage of the drive back, and it had been raining. It hadn't up the road, and the roads were muddier than, and I have a whole discussion about people driving, who to trust to drive in this part of the world too. But the muddy drive, the return trip was actually harder and slower, just because of the mud. And this was the going in. And it was weird how motorcycles, they sort of pass you. What are you doing on a motorcycle at the middle of the night going up this road?
When our daughter Therese was in Uganda with her now husband, they were on a bus on a road like that. And they got stuck.
Oh, yeah.
And so everybody got out of the bus.
Push the bus
Had to
out of the ditch.
Yeah.
push the bus.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's...
And,
There's no AAA.
if they slipped,
No,
that's-
you got to do your share to pull the weight. Well, it looks like if there aren't any final questions, we should wrap it up. Thanks for your prolonged attention. Is that 3 weeks?
3 weeks.
3 weeks, yes.
Wow. 3 weeks.
Yeah, it's a little more than 3 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah, there's a video they-
Great show.
I would not want to be on those horses,
Yeah.
have to ask